I think we've been fairly convinced that the TB1 area is roughly the site of the original money pit. There's a lot of evidence that there is still something here. We're zeroing in on possibly finding the treasure.
Katya Drayton was leading a massive excavation in the money pit area of Oak Island.
So if this is that old, then that means we are very close to the money pit, right? Which we've been suspecting forever.
It's basically the oldest looking wood we've found. Could be the cribbing from the depth of the money pit.
When something happened that terrified the whole crew, the team thought their entire expedition might be over and they might have to pack up and leave the island for good. That's how serious it was. So what exactly happened? And what were they even digging for in the first place? The breakthrough begins. Apparently, Katya Drayton and her excavation team were in the middle of one of the most intense and important digs in Oak Island history. This was not just another episode of shoveling dirt and guessing where to dig next. This time, they had brought in big equipment, big ideas, and most importantly, they were digging in a location that could finally reveal the island's biggest secret. The operation was focused on the money pit area, the most famous and mysterious spot on Oak Island. For over 2 centuries, treasure hunters have believed that something valuable, possibly gold, ancient relics, or even lost religious artifacts were hidden deep beneath this exact location. Over the years, many shafts were dug, tunnels were built, and traps were triggered, but no one has ever managed to bring up the actual treasure. So in season 12, the team was more determined than ever to go deeper, smarter, and more carefully. What exactly were they excavating for? The main goal was to locate a structure called the Chappelle Vault. According to treasure hunting records from 1897, this vault was discovered over 150 feet underground by Frederick Blair and William Chappell. They described it as a 7-foot-high, concrete-like container made with stone, which was possibly used to protect something valuable. At the time, their drilling equipment was not strong enough to reach or open it. Since then, no one has been able to find it again. But recent tests and data suggest that the team might finally be close. To try and reach this vault, Katya and the team started an ambitious project called TB1, which is short for True Believer 1. This is a steel caisson, 7 feet wide, which was being drilled straight into the ground. It was not just a narrow hole or a coarse sample. This thing was wide enough for a person to stand in, and it was designed to go very deep without collapsing. It was also equipped with something called a hammer grab, which is a heavy, claw-like tool that pulls up dirt, wood, and anything else the shaft goes through. With every scoop, the team examined the material to figure out what lies below. Why TB1 though? Why did the team choose this location? This spot was not chosen randomly. Over the last year, the team conducted groundwater tests and noticed high levels of gold and silver particles in the water deep underground, particularly below the 100-foot level. That was one major clue that something valuable could be buried nearby. In the same area, they also pulled up bits of old wooden tunnels in earlier core drillings. These were not just tree roots or fallen branches. The wood showed signs of being cut and shaped by humans, which means someone built something down there. One of the most important discoveries during those tests was a piece of wood marked with Roman numerals, and it was tied together using wooden pegs, not nails. That type of construction matches with what's believed to be the original 18th or early 19th century building style used by early treasure hunters. So with those findings in mind, the team selected this exact spot for the TB1 shaft. The plan was to drill all the way down to 150 feet, aiming to reach the same level where the Chappell Vault was originally found. If the structure was still there and had not been destroyed or removed, they hoped this dig might finally break through to it. So how did the excavation begin? The team began drilling and immediately noticed something interesting. The caisson was going down smoothly, but maybe too smoothly. Usually, the steel pipe has to be forced into the ground by rotating near and pushing through tough layers of dirt and rock. But in this case, it seemed to slide in with very little resistance. That raised 2 possibilities. Either the soil was very soft, like sand or loose dirt, or they had entered some kind of underground cavity. A void. Both options could be good news. A cavity might mean a tunnel, and a tunnel could lead to the vault. At around 95 feet, the team believed that they had passed through something hollow or weak. Soon after, the hammer grab started pulling up interesting materials. First, they found pieces of timber and not just any random branches, but short, cut wooden beams. These looked like they had been placed intentionally, possibly as part of an old tunnel structure. The wood was not fresh either. It was dark, waterlogged, and clearly very old. Now, what made these wood pieces so important? The team noticed right away that these were not natural. They were hand-cut, short, and looked like they were stacked in layers, similar to how tunnel supports would be built. This is the kind of wood you would expect in a man-made tunnel, possibly even one that led to or protected the vault. If true, that would be the first physical sign of human construction at this depth in decades. At around 110 to 111 feet, the material coming up from the shaft continued to show signs of wood. The team began to suspect that they had hit the top or side of an old tunnel. If their theory is right, this tunnel could lead directly to the vault, or even be part of the vault's protective structure. Then came a surprising discovery. They found a piece of wood with markings. Not just cracks or damage, but actual carved symbols. One piece had a clearly visible Roman numeral 3 carved into it, and another had signs of a dowel joint, which is a method of connecting two pieces of wood without using metal. This is the same type of construction used in the U-shaped structure found near the money pit in earlier seasons. That structure was dated to the 1700s, possibly earlier. So finding similar wood at this new depth suggested the same builders may have been involved. Katya and the others knew right away this was not just luck. These were not materials that happened to fall into a hole. Someone built this, and they built it deep underground, with serious tools, time, and planning. At this point, they had reached 117 feet. They were still several feet away from their big target at 150 feet, but everything was pointing in the right direction. Gold and silver traces in the water, structured wood, Roman numerals, dowel joints, soft soil and cavities, even the direction of the tunnel. It all lined up with what they knew about the Chapel Vault. Excitement was building, but so was the pressure. The team did not want to miss anything, and every grab of soil or wood had to be analyzed carefully. Marty Legina commented that any scoop could be the one that pulls up part of the vault, or even something inside it. The mood on the island was a mix of nerves and hope. You could feel it in their voices, in their decisions. They knew they were getting close, but they didn't know exactly what they were going to find next. But then disaster struck. The disaster. As the caisson neared 160 feet, the team started noticing changes. The pressure on the equipment began to drop more than expected. At first, it seemed like a good sign, the kind that might point to soft ground or an open space beneath them. In the past, that had often meant they were hitting voids, like tunnels or cavities, which would fit the idea of an underground vault or supporting structure. But this time, something felt different. The changes came quickly, and the deeper the shaft went, the more unstable things seemed. Then the ground beneath the caisson began to shift. The soil around the TB1 shaft started to fall away. A deep sink began to form, and it became clear that the excavation had triggered a collapse underground. The area around the caisson was losing support, and material was being pulled down into the shaft. The spoil being removed by the hammer grab was now being replaced by fresh collapses from the surrounding area. It didn't take long for the team to realize they were dealing with a serious subsurface failure. This was not just a typical cave-in. It looked like the ground itself was opening up. Material from above and around the shaft was falling into what appeared to be a larger void below. This meant that whatever tunnel, chamber, or pocket had been sitting below them might have finally given way under the weight of the operation. The team could see that the excavation site was not safe, and they had to act quickly. The biggest concern was the oscillator, which is the large machine responsible for driving the steel caisson down into the ground. It was extremely heavy, and it was sitting right above the area that was now collapsing. If the soil beneath the oscillator disappeared, the whole thing could slide or fall. That kind of event would not have just ruined the dig, it could have destroyed equipment or injured members of the crew. With the oscillator resting on compromised ground, everything was at risk. As the sink around the shaft grew, it became clear that the structure of the site had been weakened. They were losing soil and stability. The ground around the caisson had sunk by about 30 feet in some spots. a drop significant enough to raise alarms. This kind of collapse suggested that the void underneath was large, possibly larger than expected, and whatever structure had been holding the Earth in place was no longer there. Even worse, this kind of shift could mean that the very thing they were trying to reach, which was the chapel vault in this case, might now be covered or even damaged. If the vault had been part of the structure that gave way, it could be buried deeper under layers of fresh collapse. That was a painful possibility after coming so far. The crew had to consider whether their target had been lost to the collapse or if it had been just out of reach, now pushed even further away. There were no clear answers yet. The team could not see exactly what had happened beneath the surface, only the results above. The void below was pulling in the surrounding material, creating an unstable and unpredictable environment. Continuing the dig without making changes would have been too dangerous. At this point, they had to decide whether to keep going at all. To prevent further collapse and protect the machinery, the team had to adjust. Their first move was to backfill the area, meaning that they had to add material back into the shaft and surrounding ground to stabilize it. This would not have reversed the collapse, but it might have kept it from spreading. With the caisson paused at 160 feet, they began filling in sections and monitoring the situation carefully. This kind of setback was costly and frustrating for them. Every day spent dealing with collapse and backfilling was a day not spent digging toward their goal. The Oak Island dig season is limited, and any delay eats into valuable time. What made it harder was the timing. The team had been just feet away from the depth where they believed the Chapel vault might be. If things had held together just a little longer, they might have reached it. Still, the crew was not giving up. They had been through difficult situations before, and they knew that setbacks were part of the process. But this one was different. This was a physical, structural threat that could shut the entire operation down if it got worse. Now their focus had shifted. Instead of only thinking about what might be buried beneath them, they had to think about how to protect the equipment, the crew, and the work they had already done. There was no guarantee that they would be able to continue. The backfilling would help, but they still didn't know if the caisson could move forward or if the surrounding ground would hold. Now the question is, was the collapse just bad luck, or did it disturb something hidden deep beneath the island? More clues and theories. Even with the setback, the discoveries so far have revived some of the biggest theories about Oak Island. The signs of man-made tunnels, carved wood, and metallic traces have sparked new interest in long-standing ideas. Some believe the team is closing in on a centuries-old treasure tied to European explorers or hidden fortunes from lost empires. Others still link the site to the Knights Templar or secret religious relics brought across the ocean. With each new layer uncovered, the clues suggest Oak Island's secrets might be older, deeper, and more complex than anyone imagined. Now tell us, do you believe some treasure really exists on this island, or the team is chasing nothing more than a lost cause? Share your opinion in the comments below. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next chapter in Oak Island's most intense season yet.